Welcome to my tutorial on how to construct objects out of simples. I'm going to try and keep this as short as I can. I'm just going to show you kind of how it's done and just go over how everything works. You're going to have to figure out strategies and techniques on your own. This isn't really going to be delving into that sort of thing. So if you've been on the Google Drive, you've seen a bunch of this stuff, like for example this. You're like, oh, like where do I find the Crazy Eights object? Like, yeah, it's definitely not part of distance. How'd you, import that? Well, the answer is I didn't. This is what's called a custom object. Right now it's just called group, but you can give it a custom name. You can say Crazy Eights. And then that's what it's called. When you look in level objects, you can see Crazy Eights, Kill Grid, Level Editor, Car. So this is one of the many things you can do with custom objects. As you can see, it's got application for a lot of really powerful uses. And you can also see, it looks kind of weird when you zoom in. So let's explore kind of what this is, how it's done, how it works, etc. So first thing we got to do is ungroup it. You can do that with Shift G, and then that turns it into a bunch of separate objects here. Let's go ahead and turn on center points. You could see there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff that I use to make this. So these are all like separate objects that you can find in the level editor. So here you could see this is a virus pillar that I just recolored. All of the settings on the side you can use to recolor the different objects, make them look however you want. It will kind of make sense what they all do when you go into them, and honestly, it's not going to stick if I explain it all here, so I'm not going to bother. But you get the idea. You put it all together in a specific format, you collect it all, you hit G, and then it's all, like one object. So I will just kind of go into explaining simples and how to use them. Simples are a really powerful tool because stuff like this, it looks very machine-like, so I use this instead of a simple because it's got textures, it's got like little facets, you can see it's got grooves, and it just looks a lot more detailed. But for the cockpit, wasn't really anything like that I could use. So what I ended up doing is just using two teardrops and placing them on top of each other. So what are simples? How do they work? Well, you can see kind of the properties on the panel right here. It's this shape. It's a teardrop shape. That's the actual object. All the rest of it is just the textures. Now, simples share one thing. You can swap out the textures, which is really, really powerful. It allows you to make them many, many different things. So right now this is kind of like a metal/stone fuselage. What if I wanted to make this water? Well, I can use the preset here to find the water preset, and then just drop it right in. Well, that doesn't look fantastic, but there's a lot of fine-grained control you can have. So let's say, for example, we just don't like the texture scale. We can turn that up by quite a bit. Now it looks a lot more detailed, doesn't it? Because the texture is scaled smaller, and if you drag and slide that, you can kind of see what that does. It makes it smaller and bigger, like it's the amount of zoom on the texture when it's applied. So we can flip the texture UV, which just flips it the other way around. We can turn off and turn on world mapping. World mapping just means that if two objects intersect, let's say for example I duplicated this and then pushed it right down here, if it lined up right, the texture would kind of, let me just turn off the center points, the texture would kind of go on. As you can see, these spots just kind of continue right there. So we've also disabled the bump, which just makes it look real smooth. There's no real texture detail aside from the bump, so that just like takes away all the detail there. We can shift the bump strength, make it smoother, sharper. We can disable collision. That means whether or not you run into it. Whether it's solid, disable reflect, turn on and off reflections, disable bump, which is exactly what I was just messing with earlier. Turn on and off diffuse, which has its applications, makes it look much darker. It changes if it interacts with the ambient light here. We can set it as an additive transparency, which means that only the emission property would be visible. The emission, of course, is dependent on the emit color right up here on the settings panel. We've also got a reflect color, a spec color. I won't go into those right now. You can change the verse inverse emit, which just changes where the emission happens, whether it's on the detailing or whether it's everywhere else. Multiplicative transparency, which does kind of a different thing, makes it so the solid color is transparent. You can turn them both on. You can do one at a time. You get it. There's lots and lots of different ways you can set these up so that they look different. And this is your main tool when you're setting something up, because for the little, turbines here, that was easy enough. Like I could set those up just by finding stuff like buildings and decorations in the library here. In the decorations, I could just kind of like grab something like this and scale it down and be like, oh, this is like some round part on the car because it looks mechanical and detailed. But for the spoiler, I didn't really have that option here. So as you can see, I used a wedge to make the sides. I used just a block to make the top. I used a different block to make it dip. They're all separate objects, but they're just put together into one solid thing here, and they're all textured the same. So you can copy and paste presets if you want things to share like the same visual texture appearance, which is such a time saver, honestly, because you can, if for example you like this, you want to make maybe a sun, then you could be like, well, instead of messing around in this, I'll just find the custom object I like, and then go into simples, go into sphere. Where's the sphere? Right there. And just like, oh, well, that doesn't really work. Paste properties. Much more sun-like now. Much more sun-like. Additive and multiplicative transparency is turned on here, but you can turn that off and you can customize it in any number of ways. So yeah, it's just a really powerful tool that you can use to create custom decorations for your map. It really adds a custom look and feel. Like for example, in Cavern, if I had just used objects that came with the game, it would turn out to be like a bunch of buildings, stuff like this, custom object. Stuff like this, custom object. I mean, the entire tunnel, custom, simple objects. So really, this is what you want to really heavily lean on when you're going to make something that you don't want to look like a default distance map. So hope you enjoyed the video, or hope it was informational, really. And I look forward to seeing what you end up doing with it. Bye.